The Gupta Empire stands as one of the most influential powers in ancient Indian history, not only for its cultural and scientific achievements, but also for a military system that balanced strategic restraint with decisive force. Unlike empires that expanded purely through relentless conquest, the Gupta state relied on a carefully structured military doctrine designed to secure borders, neutralize threats, and maintain internal stability rather than permanent warfare. Understanding Gupta military strategy requires moving beyond simple battlefield tactics and examining how geography, diplomacy, economics, and ideology shaped the empire's approach to war. The Gupta Empire emerged in the late 3rd and early 4th centuries CE during a period of fragmentation following the collapse of the Kushan and Satavahana powers. Northern India was divided among numerous regional rulers, tribal confederations, and remnants of earlier imperial systems. In this unstable environment, the Guptas did not rise as reckless conquerors but as methodical consolidators of power. Their military strategy was inseparable from statecraft, and war was used as a political instrument rather than an end in itself. The earliest Gupta rulers, beginning with Sri Gupta and Gatotkacha, laid the foundation for military organization by securing small but strategically important territories along the Ganges basin. Control of river routes was critical. The Ganges was not only a trade artery but also a natural defensive line. Gupta strategy prioritized holding riverine corridors, which allowed rapid troop movement, logistical support, and economic control. This focus on geography distinguished Gupta warfare from many contemporaries who relied solely on territorial expansion. Chandragupta I marked the true transformation of the Guptas into an imperial power. His military strategy relied heavily on alliances, particularly through marriage diplomacy. By marrying a Likavi princess, Chandragupta I secured the support of a powerful republican clan without prolonged warfare. This alliance effectively neutralized potential threats on his eastern flank and allowed the Guptas to redirect military resources elsewhere. The Likavi alliance demonstrates a core principle of Gupta military thinking. Victory achieved without battle was superior to victory achieved through bloodshed. However, diplomacy did not replace military preparedness. The Gupta army was carefully structured and professionalized. Inscriptions and literary sources indicate that the Gupta military consisted of 4 primary components: infantry, cavalry, war elephants, and chariots. This classical fourfold army, known as the Chaturanga, had existed in India for centuries, but under the Guptas it reached a refined level of coordination and discipline. Infantry formed the backbone of the army. Gupta infantry soldiers were typically equipped with bows, spears, swords, and shields. Archery was especially important. Indian composite bows, made from layers of wood and horn, provided superior range and penetration. Gupta military strategy emphasized massed archery to weaken enemy formations before close combat. This tactic was particularly effective against nomadic or lightly armored foes. Cavalry played a more prominent role in Gupta warfare than in earlier Indian armies. Contact with Central Asian powers, such as the Kushans and later the Sakas, influenced the Gupta emphasis on mounted troops. Gupta cavalry units were used for rapid flanking maneuvers, reconnaissance, and pursuit of retreating enemies. Speed and mobility allowed the Guptas to avoid drawn-out sieges whenever possible. War elephants were perhaps the most psychologically powerful element of the Gupta army. Elephants served both practical and symbolic functions. On the battlefield, armored elephants could break enemy lines, scatter infantry, and create chaos. Strategically, their presence projected imperial authority. Many Gupta campaigns relied on the intimidation factor of elephants, forcing opponents to submit without full-scale engagement. This again reflects the Gupta preference for minimizing prolonged warfare. Chariots, while declining in importance compared to earlier Vedic times, were still used ceremonially and in limited tactical roles, often carrying elite warriors or commanders. Their continued presence emphasized continuity with ancient traditions, reinforcing the ideological legitimacy of Gupta rule. The real strength of Gupta military strategy lay not merely in battlefield tactics but in operational planning. The Guptas avoided overextension. Unlike later empires that collapsed under the strain of vast frontiers, Gupta rulers expanded gradually and consolidated each region before advancing further. Military governors were installed in newly conquered territories, supported by local elites who were co-opted into the imperial system. This policy reduced the need for constant military occupation. Local rulers were allowed to retain authority in exchange for tribute and loyalty, enforced by the implicit threat of Gupta military intervention. The army thus functioned as a deterrent force as much as an active fighting body. Samudragupta represents the high point of Gupta military ambition. His campaigns, recorded in the famous Allahabad pillar inscription, provide rare insight into Gupta strategic thinking. Rather than annexing all conquered territories directly, Samudragupta categorized defeated rulers into different classes. Some were fully absorbed into the empire, others were reinstated as tributary kings, and still others were allowed autonomy under Gupta suzerainty. This tiered approach to conquest was revolutionary. It allowed the Gupta Empire to project power across much of the Indian subcontinent without the administrative burden of direct rule everywhere. Military force was used selectively, targeting strategic centers rather than engaging in indiscriminate conquest. Samudragupta's southern campaign is especially revealing. Instead of attempting permanent occupation of southern India, he conducted rapid military strikes, defeated key rulers, extracted tribute, and withdrew. This prevented southern coalitions from forming against him while preserving Gupta resources. Such hit and withdraw operations demonstrate an advanced understanding of strategic depth and logistical limitations. Defensive strategy was equally important. The Guptas recognized that the northwestern frontier was the most vulnerable region of the empire. This area had historically served as the entry point for Central Asian invasions. To counter this threat, the Guptas fortified key cities and maintained mobile cavalry units capable of responding quickly to incursions. Rather than constructing massive defensive walls, Gupta strategy relied on layered defense. Border regions were held by allied rulers or military governors who acted as buffers. If an invasion occurred, it would first encounter resistance in these outer zones, buying time for the central army to mobilize. This approach proved effective for several generations. Military intelligence played a crucial role. Gupta rulers maintained networks of spies and informants, particularly along trade routes. Merchants, monks, and diplomats often doubled as intelligence sources. This allowed the Guptas to anticipate threats and respond proactively rather than reactively. Logistics was another cornerstone of Gupta military success. Armies moved along river systems whenever possible, ensuring steady supplies of food and equipment. Temporary supply depots were established in advance of campaigns. This reduced dependence on local foraging, which often alienated civilian populations. By minimizing disruption to agricultural communities, the Guptas preserved economic productivity even during wartime. Economic strength and military power reinforced each other. The Gupta state invested heavily in agriculture, irrigation, and trade. A stable economy generated the revenue necessary to maintain a standing army. In turn, military security protected trade routes and farmlands. This symbiotic relationship allowed the Guptas to sustain military readiness without exhausting the population. Ideology also shaped military strategy. Gupta rulers presented themselves as protectors of Dharma and cosmic order. Warfare was framed as a necessary act to restore balance rather than as an aggressive pursuit of glory. This moral justification helped legitimize military campaigns and maintain public support. Religious patronage played a subtle role. By supporting Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain institutions, the Guptas fostered loyalty across diverse communities. Monasteries and temples often served as centers of communication and logistics. Monks traveling across regions transmitted information and reinforced imperial authority. The absence of constant internal rebellion during much of the Gupta period suggests that their military strategy successfully integrated coercion with consent. Force was available but not overused. This balance created a relatively stable imperial structure. However, Gupta military strategy was not static. It evolved in response to changing threats. As long as the empire faced fragmented regional rivals, its methods proved highly effective. The challenge would come later when new external enemies emerged who operated under very different strategic assumptions. The Gupta military system did not rely on overwhelming brutality or endless conquest. Instead, it emphasized balance between force and diplomacy, between mobility and fortification, between innovation and tradition. This balance is what allowed the empire to survive for more than 2 centuries in a highly volatile political environment. One of the most important but often overlooked aspects of Gupta military strategy was intelligence and reconnaissance. Ancient Indian texts such as the Arthashastra, which continued to influence Gupta governance, emphasized the use of spies, informants, and covert agents. While the Arthashastra predates the Guptas, its principles were still actively applied. The Gupta court maintained networks of spies who gathered information about enemy movements, internal dissent, and political instability in rival kingdoms. These intelligence systems allowed Gupta rulers to anticipate threats rather than react to them blindly. Instead of launching reckless invasions, Gupta generals often waited for the perfect moment when an enemy was weakened by succession disputes, famine, or external pressure. Military action was often synchronized with diplomatic maneuvers, such as forming alliances with neighboring states or neutralizing potential enemies through marriage and tribute. The structure of the Gupta army itself reflected this calculated approach. The army was divided into 4 traditional components: infantry, cavalry, chariots, and war elephants. However, unlike earlier empires that relied heavily on chariots, the Guptas adapted to changing battlefield realities. Chariots gradually lost importance, while cavalry and elephants became central to battlefield dominance. Infantry soldiers formed the backbone of the army. They were equipped with bows, spears, swords, and shields. Archers played a particularly crucial role. Gupta archery techniques were highly advanced, with composite bows capable of penetrating armor at long distances. Infantry formations were flexible rather than rigid, allowing units to adapt quickly to changing conditions on the battlefield. Cavalry forces provided speed and strategic depth. Mounted soldiers were used for flanking maneuvers, rapid strikes, and pursuit of retreating enemies. The Guptas understood that mobility could often decide battles faster than brute force. Cavalry units allowed them to control open terrain and disrupt enemy supply lines without committing their entire army. War elephants were the most psychologically powerful element of the Gupta military. These massive animals served as mobile shock units. Heavily armored and often carrying archers or spearmen, elephants were deployed to break enemy lines and create chaos. Their presence alone could terrify opposing troops unfamiliar with elephant warfare. Gupta commanders used elephants strategically rather than recklessly, deploying them at decisive moments instead of sending them blindly into battle. Fortifications also played a critical role in Gupta military planning. Rather than expanding endlessly, the empire invested heavily in defending key cities, trade routes, and river crossings. Forts were strategically placed along the Ganges and other major rivers, allowing the Guptas to control movement and commerce. These fortifications were not merely defensive. They served as logistical hubs where troops could resupply, regroup, and prepare counteroffensives. The Guptas also understood the importance of logistics. Armies cannot fight without food, weapons, and morale. Agricultural prosperity within the empire ensured a steady supply of grain for soldiers. Roads and river networks facilitated the movement of troops and supplies across vast distances. Unlike many empires that collapsed due to overextended supply lines, the Gupta state maintained logistical discipline, ensuring that military campaigns remained sustainable. Another defining feature of Gupta military strategy was restraint. Unlike later empires that saw total annihilation of enemies, the Guptas often allowed defeated rulers to remain in power as vassals. This reduced resistance, lowered administrative costs, and minimized rebellions. Military victory was not always followed by direct annexation. Often it resulted in tribute, loyalty, and strategic advantage without prolonged occupation. This approach became particularly evident during the reign of Samudragupta, often described as the Napoleon of India. His military campaigns were swift, calculated, and strategically selective. Instead of conquering every territory outright, he focused on neutralizing threats and expanding influence. His famous Allahabad pillar inscription details a long list of defeated rulers, many of whom were later reinstated as allies or tributaries rather than eliminated. Samudragupta's campaigns demonstrate the Gupta preference for political domination over territorial obsession. Military force was used as a tool to reshape the power balance, not merely to expand borders. This allowed the empire to remain stable even as it expanded across northern India. Naval strategy, while limited compared to later empires, also played a supporting role. Riverine fleets patrolled major waterways, protecting trade routes and ensuring secure communication between regions. Control of rivers like the Ganges was not only economically vital but also militarily strategic. Rivers acted as natural barriers and highways simultaneously. The moral and ideological dimension of Gupta warfare must also be understood. Warfare during the Gupta period was deeply influenced by dharma, abharma, adharma, concept encompassing duty, righteousness, and cosmic order. While war was accepted as necessary, excessive cruelty was discouraged in royal ideology. This did not mean battles were gentle, but it did shape how victories were portrayed and remembered. Gupta kings emphasized legitimacy through righteous rule rather than fear alone. Military victories were framed as restoration, of order rather than conquest for conquest's sake. This ideological framing helped maintain loyalty among subjects and reduced internal instability. Despite its strengths, the Gupta military system was not invincible. Over time, changing geopolitical realities exposed its limitations. The arrival of the Huns in the 5th century CE marked a turning point. Unlike previous enemies, the Huns employed highly mobile cavalry, tactics that challenged traditional Indian warfare methods. Their speed, unpredictability, and relentless raids strained Gupta defenses. Gupta responses to the Hun invasions reveal both adaptability and weakness. While rulers like Skandagupta initially succeeded in repelling Hun forces through decisive military action, prolonged pressure exhausted resources. The empire's reliance on centralized authority made it vulnerable once. Sustained warfare disrupted economic and administrative stability. As internal cohesion weakened, regional governors gained autonomy. The same military restraint that once ensured stability now limited aggressive expansion and decisive counteroffensives. Gradually, the Gupta Empire fragmented into smaller kingdoms, each inheriting elements of Gupta military tradition but lacking its unified strength. Yet even in decline, the Gupta military legacy endured. Later Indian kingdoms adopted Gupta tactics, administrative structures, and strategic principles. Emphasis on combined arms, flexible formations, fortifications, and intelligence became standard features of Indian warfare for centuries. The Gupta Empire did not fall because it lacked military strength. It declined because historical conditions changed faster than its system could adapt. Its strategy was designed for balance, stability, and controlled power, not for endless, high-speed warfare against nomadic invaders. In historical perspective, the Gupta military represents a sophisticated model of pre-modern warfare. It avoided the extremes of constant conquest and rigid defense. Instead, it pursued strategic dominance through intelligence, diplomacy, and carefully applied force. The Guptas proved that an empire does not need perpetual war to remain powerful. Sometimes, restraint itself can be a strategic weapon. Their military strategy was not about conquering the world, but about sustaining order within it. And that, perhaps, is why the Gupta Empire remains remembered not merely as a military power, but as one of the most stable and culturally rich civilizations in ancient history.